Imagine you killed a deer 3 days ago. You're starving. Your family is starving. The meat is sitting right there, but it's turned black and crawling with flies. Every instinct tells you not to touch it. But then your grandmother does something that seems completely insane. She eats it anyway. And somehow, she doesn't die. What if the most dangerous looking food was actually the safest thing you could eat? Here's the thing about modern life. We've gotten so obsessed with keeping food cold that we've completely forgotten an older, stranger truth. For thousands of years, humans kept food fresh without electricity, without ice, without any of the technology we think is absolutely essential. But it wasn't magic. It was something far more interesting. A collection of accidental discoveries that turned into survival superpowers. And the story of how we figured this out isn't just about food. It's about humans learning to engineer time itself. Let's rewind about 10,000 years. You're standing in front of a fire with a freshly killed animal. It's summer. The meat will spoil in hours. Your stomach is already growling. So what do? Someone discovered something by accident. If you keep the meat over smoke long enough, it lasts longer, days longer, maybe even weeks. But here's what nobody realized at the time. Smoke wasn't just making the food taste interesting, it was doing something invisible. The heat was drawing moisture out of the meat, and that moisture was the highway that bacteria needed to survive. Without water, the microbes simply couldn't multiply. The meat became a time capsule, a preserved version of itself. That single observation, smoke preserves meat, became humanity's first refrigerator. Now fast forward a few thousand years. Humans discover something even more powerful: salt. If you cover fish or meat in salt, it does something almost supernatural. The salt pulls water right out of the food through a process called osmosis. What you're left with is essentially desiccated flesh. Moisture-free, hostile to bacteria, capable of lasting for months, sometimes years. Ancient sailors understood this so well that they could cross oceans with nothing but dried, salted meat and hardtack. They were literally eating fossilized food, and it kept them alive. But here's where things get weird. Salt doesn't just work through drying. It also changes the pH of the food, making it acidic enough that microorganisms can't survive. It's like the ancient world accidentally invented a chemical weapon against spoilage. A single mineral doing the work of a modern freezer. The Vikings got this. Medieval Europeans got this. Every fishing community on Earth got this. Salt became currency. Wars were fought over access to salt mines. Entire economies were built on the power of this white powder. But now you'd think that's the end of the story. Smoke and salt. Two methods, both reliable. Humans solved the problem, right? Wrong. Somewhere along the way, and honestly, historians still aren't sure exactly when, humans discovered something that contradicted every instinct they had about food safety. They discovered that if you let food rot, it actually became safer to eat. Enter fermentation. Imagine intentionally letting cabbage sit in its own brine, watching it bubble and transform, knowing that to your eyes and nose, it looks exactly like it's spoiling. Your brain is basically saying, absolutely not. And yet civilizations built around fermentation, kimchi in Korea, miso in Japan, sauerkraut in Germany, thrived for millennia. Here's the science. When you submerge vegetables in salt water and leave them in the dark, good bacteria, specifically lactobacillus, multiply rapidly. These bacteria ferment the vegetables and produce lactic acid, making the environment so acidic that harmful bacteria can't survive. You're essentially weaponizing one type of bacteria to protect you from another. Your gut is literally recognizing fermented food as ancestral medicine. The probiotics in fermented food still help your digestion today, thousands of years later. Ancient people stumbled onto something that modern scientists are still validating. This is where scientists were completely surprised. Fermentation isn't preservation despite microbial life. It's preservation because of microbial life. It's controlled decomposition. And it might be the oldest biotechnology humans ever invented. But our ancestors weren't limited to just chemistry. They were also patient observers of nature. In places where it snowed, people figured out that you could dig deep ice cellars, underground chambers packed with sawdust and ice from frozen lakes. You could store food there for entire seasons. In cooler climates, you didn't even need ice. You just needed the ground itself. Dig deep enough and you find a natural temperature that never changes. A refrigerator carved into the earth. This is what almost nobody realizes. Before the first icebox was built in the 19th century, humans had already designed remarkably sophisticated cold storage. Medieval castles had ice houses. Chinese emperors had similar structures. Even in places where winters were mild, people built underground storage that maintained temperatures cool enough to prevent rapid spoilage. Nature had set the temperature. Humans just had to find it and engineer a way to access it. Here's the real insight underneath all of this. Ancient people weren't just trying to keep food cold or preserved. They were asking a deeper question. They were asking, how do we steal time from nature? How do we eat last month's harvest today? The answer turned out to be elegant. Smoke, salt, fermentation, underground, acid, cold. Each method isolated food from the same basic condition that spoilage requires: the presence of water, favorable pH, and living microbial guests. We look back at these methods now and call them primitive, but they required observation, experimentation, risk. Someone had to be brave enough to eat the fermented food first. Someone had to test whether salt really worked. And the strangest part? These ancient methods are making a comeback. Fermented foods are trendy. Charcuterie is fashionable. Smoked meats are expensive. We've gone full circle, rejecting our modern shortcuts and reaching back for the ancestral wisdom of preservation. So here's the question that should stick with you. If ancient people could preserve food for months without electricity, what are we really buying when we pay for convenience? And what have we lost by outsourcing this knowledge to machines? If you enjoyed exploring this mystery of how humans outsmart nature and time itself, consider subscribing to the Primal Logic for more fascinating stories about the hidden reasons behind the world around us. Thanks for watching.